Single dad rents a room to a crying homeless girl, not knowing she's a millionaire CEO's daughter. I'm not asking for a handout, I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. Luke froze mid-step, rain dripping from the brim of his worn baseball cap. His boots squelched on the wooden porch of the weather-beaten house he'd called home for 5 years. The voice came from the shadows, soft, shaky, but holding on to something like dignity. He turned toward it. Curled up beneath the porch overhang sat a young woman, maybe 22, soaked through. Blonde hair clung to her cheeks, and she hugged a scuffed black suitcase tightly. She was trembling, not just from cold, but something deeper. Fear, maybe. Or sheer exhaustion. "You lost?" Luke asked cautiously. She shook her head. "No, I saw the sign in your window. About the room." He followed her gaze to the faded sheet taped inside. "Room for rent, $100, 0 cents/month. Inquire within." He had put it up last week when he realized Jacob needed new shoes, and the fridge was nearly empty again. "I've got cash," she added quickly, pulling out a wad of damp bills. $200, all of it. I can pay for the first month now." Luke glanced at the money, then back at her. She looked out of place, not quite homeless, not quite okay either. Her clothes were soaked but not ragged. Jeans clung to her legs like a second skin. The thin sweater she wore had a tear at the elbow. Her boots were worn but solid. She looked like someone who'd had something until recently. "You got a name?" he asked. A pause. "Claire," she said, "just Claire." Luke scratched the back of his neck. His breath fogged in the cold. Behind the door, the heater hummed. Jacob would be finishing his apple slices and nodding off in front of the old TV. He looked at her again, wide eyes, drenched, clearly trying not to cry. "All right," he said, stepping aside and unlocking the door. "Come on in." She blinked. "Really?" "Yeah. But leave the shoes by the door. Floors creak, and try not to wake the kid." Claire stood slowly, lifting the suitcase. She winced, from pain or cold he couldn't tell, and stepped inside like she was crossing into sacred ground. The smell of rain and something faintly floral followed her in. Luke flipped on the hallway light. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, hardwood floors, and thrift store furniture, but clean, lived in. He led her down the hall. "This is your room," he said. "Small, but the bed's good. Sheets are clean." Claire stepped in, still clutching the suitcase. "Thank you," she said, voice soft. "Bathroom's down the hall. Kitchen's yours to use. Just label your stuff in the fridge." She nodded. "I've got a 6-year-old, he added. "Jacob. Good kid. I don't bring strangers around much." "I won't be any trouble," she said. "I swear." Luke studied her. There was no desperation in her tone, just something steadier, a quiet resolve. "All right," he said. "We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. You need towels?" "I'll manage," she replied quickly. He gave her a look, then returned with a folded towel and an extra blanket. She took them, hesitating slightly. Her eyes had gone glassy. "I mean it. Thank you." Luke nodded. "Night, Claire." She lingered in the doorway after he left, staring down the dim hallway. Then she closed the door gently and exhaled, like she had been holding her breath for days. In the kitchen, Luke poured himself a glass of water, staring out the rain-speckled window. He should have asked more questions, checked ID, but something about her felt honest. He glanced at the fridge. A magnet held up one of Jacob's crayon drawings, a crooked house with 3 stick figures beneath a smiling sun. "Free." Luke blinked, then shook his head and took a sip. Sometimes people just need a chance. And sometimes the ones who show up on your porch in the rain are the ones who end up changing everything. By the next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and the ground soft. Light filtered through the faded curtains of the small house, casting a soft glow on the floorboards. Claire's door was still closed when Luke passed by with a mug of coffee. In the living room, Jacob sat cross-legged on the rug with his favorite toy truck, missing wheels but still beloved. "Hey, buddy," Luke said. "Sleep okay?" Jacob nodded. "I heard someone come in last night." Luke paused. "Yeah, her name's Claire. She's staying in the guest room for a while." Jacob's eyes lit up. "Is she nice?" "She seemed polite." Just then, Claire's door creaked open. She stepped out slowly, blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, wearing the same clothes as the night before, now clean and dry. She carried the folded blanket and towel in her arms. "Good morning," she said gently. "I washed these." "You didn't have to," Luke replied. "I know." Jacob peeked from behind Luke. Claire smiled and crouched to meet his eye level. "You must be Jacob." "I'm 6, he said proudly. "Well, 6 is a great age," she replied. "I was 6 once too." He laughed, a sound that made Luke feel a little less tired. Claire settled in without fuss. She didn't take up space or make noise. Her room stayed neat, bed made, desk organized with precision. At first, Luke thought she was afraid of being kicked out, but it soon became clear that's just who she was. She washed dishes without being asked, wiped counters, took out the trash. When Luke came home late, the kitchen light would still be on, a plate in the fridge with a sticky note. "Eat before you fall over." Jacob adored her. At first, he called her Miss Claire, but that didn't last long. One evening, she helped him fold paper cranes. Her fingers moved with quiet grace, forming perfect shapes. "You're good at that," Luke said from the doorway. Claire smiled. "I had a lot of time alone growing up. Folding paper was quieter than talking." That night, she read from The Secret Garden, a book Luke didn't know was still in the house. Her voice was calm and rhythmic, like she had read it 100 times. She even did voices, just enough to make Jacob giggle. Later, after Jacob went to bed, Luke rinsed dishes while Claire dried. "You don't talk about your past," he said. Claire looked up, then back down. Not much to talk about. Luke didn't press, but he noticed things. Her hands, steady, refined, like someone who once took ballet or piano. The way she always crossed her ankles when she sat. Her posture, her speech, polite, measured, graceful. And the details. She used a small jar of hand cream, label worn off, but the scent was unmistakable, almond and orchid, expensive. Her phone was older, but the leather case? Hand-stitched, monogrammed. The letters faded, but there. No makeup, no jewelry. But her toothbrush was imported. Her shampoo, rosemary and vetiver, the kind found in luxury hotels. And her words. She helped Jacob with a school project, using phrases like narrative structure and thematic resonance. She corrected his spelling with gentle precision. One afternoon, Luke passed by her room and heard classical music. Vivaldi, maybe, or Debussy, something he couldn't name but felt all the same. It didn't add up. Claire never said where she came from or why she'd ended up on his porch, but Luke was a mechanic. He knew when something didn't fit. She spoke like someone raised in a house with chandeliers, but she moved like someone who had fallen far and was trying to rise again, quietly. He didn't ask. People had stories. She'd tell hers when she was ready. Meanwhile, she was helping Jacob laugh again, helping Luke breathe easier, just by being there. Sometimes Luke would come home late to find her and Jacob asleep on the couch, curled under the same blanket, a book half finished on Claire's chest. And he'd smile, not with amusement, but with something warmer, something real. Maybe it wasn't forever, but for now, it felt like something beginning. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just after sunset. Luke had come home early from the garage, a rare break in his routine, to find the house quiet. Jacob was already in bed, a line of paper cranes strung across the headboard from Claire's latest craft project. Claire was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming something under her breath as she dried the dishes. The radio played faint jazz, warm and low. As she moved to put away the last plate, something slipped from her sweater pocket and landed on the floor with a soft clink. Luke bent to pick it up, already reaching out before she noticed. "I'm sorry, that's—" she started, but her voice caught. It was a small silver locket, delicate, ornate. He opened it gently, unsure why. Inside, 2 tiny photographs, a man and a woman, smiling, dressed in expensive formal wear. The woman had the same sea-glass eyes as Claire, the same smile. Luke turned the locket over in his palm. There was an inscription etched in gold on the back. To Claire, "Love, Dad." But just beneath that, a name. W.R. Montgomery. The name landed like a stone in Luke's chest. William R. Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Properties. The same man whose photo appeared on every billboard in the state, smiling in crisp suits with slogans like "Building the Future, Buying the Past." The same man whose company had bought out half the county, bulldozed neighborhoods, and turned affordable homes into luxury condos no one here could afford. The same man who, months ago, had pulled funding from a community shelter Jacob and his late wife once volunteered at. Claire's eyes widened when she saw what Luke was holding. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "just give it back." Luke handed it over without a word. She took it and disappeared down the hallway. That night, he could not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, his old laptop open in front of him. The screen glowed in the dark like a quiet confession. He typed Claire Montgomery into the search bar and scrolled through dozens of images, red carpet events, charity galas, vacation photos on private beaches. And there she was. Smaller, younger, hair shorter, eyes brighter, posing beside her father in front of a marble fireplace. The caption read, "CEO William Montgomery with daughter Claire at the governor's gala." Luke leaned back, hand over his mouth. So it was true. She had not just wandered onto his porch one rainy night. She had walked away from a life of unimaginable wealth, power, influence. And here she was, folding laundry in his living room, teaching his son how to fold cranes, cleaning floors, cooking dinner, sleeping in a room that leaked when it rained. He could have asked questions, could have demanded answers, could have told her to leave, but he didn't. Instead, he opened the spice cabinet, pulled out cinnamon and sugar, and started making dough. The next morning, Claire woke to the smell of baking bread. She padded into the kitchen, her oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder. She stopped when she saw the plate waiting for her, still warm, the crust golden, steam rising gently. Beside it, a ceramic mug filled with honey-sweetened tea. And a note, written in Luke's steady, clumsy handwriting on a piece of brown paper towel. "In this house, if a daughter needs a father, even for just a few days, I can try to fill the part, no questions asked." Claire stood still for a long moment, holding the paper. Then she sat down, tore off a corner of the bread and ate it slowly, quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks and disappearing into her lap. Upstairs, Jacob stirred awake, calling her name. She wiped her eyes, folded the note gently, and tucked it into the pocket of her hoodie, right next to the locket. That morning, she didn't run. She stayed. The house was quiet again. It had been 3 days since the locket incident, and though Claire and Luke kept moving through routines like nothing had happened, something had shifted. Claire no longer avoided his eyes, and Luke no longer questioned the elegant details that didn't match her supposed story. It was Jacob who finally bridged the silence. One rainy afternoon, he came home muddy and frustrated because another boy had made fun of his shoes. Claire knelt down to untie his laces, wiping the grime from his ankles with a warm towel. Her voice was soft, but firm. "You're not what you wear, Jacob. You're what you do for others." He looked up. "Is that what your dad told you?" She hesitated, froze just for a second, then quietly, "No. It's what he forgot." That night, while Jacob slept curled up with a paper crane in one hand, Claire sat at the kitchen table long after Luke had finished the dishes. She nursed a mug of lukewarm tea and stared out the window, as if weighing whether the storm outside was worth walking into. Finally she spoke. "You know who I am now, don't you?" Luke sat across from her. He didn't nod. He didn't deny it. Claire looked down at the mug in her hands. "My father is William Montgomery," she said, "CEO of Montgomery Properties, maybe the wealthiest man in the state." Luke stayed quiet. "Meant just announced the cancellation of a housing project in East Briarwood," she continued. "You've probably heard. Families were counting on it. But they're not just numbers to me." Her voice cracked. "My mother used to teach there, volunteer literacy classes at the Briarwood Community Center. She loved that place. Said it reminded her of the life she could have had, the one she gave up when she married him." Luke leaned back, arms crossed, listening. Claire took a breath. "I found out he was going to demolish the whole area, not just the project, the center too, for another luxury development, gated townhomes. He didn't even hesitate." She swallowed. "I confronted him, said I'd tell the press, the board, whoever would listen." He laughed. Her hand gripped the mug tighter. He said, "No one listens to a girl who's never worked a day in her life." Then told me if I wanted to see the world, I could go play poor. She looked up, eyes bright with something between fury and heartbreak. He told me. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. I left that night, took what I could fit in a suitcase, got rained on, lost my wallet, found your porch. Luke studied her. "You haven't talked to him since?" Claire shook her head. "I don't want his money, or his name. I just want to live a real life, with real people." Luke rubbed his jaw. "And this is real to you?" Claire's eyes softened. "You didn't ask questions. You gave me bread and tea." Jacob smiles in his sleep again. "I haven't heard laughter in a house in years." She paused. "You fixed more in a week than my father did with $1 billion. Luke looked down, flushing slightly. "I don't need much," she added. "Just a place where I don't have to pretend, where kindness isn't transactional." She glanced around, cracked tile, flickering light bulb, the scent of cinnamon clinging to the air. "It's not a mansion," she said, "but it's the first place that's ever felt like home." They sat in silence after that. Outside, the storm rolled on, steady and relentless, but inside, something had settled. Not peace, but maybe understanding. A quiet truce between two people carrying more than they ever meant to, choosing, finally, not to carry it alone. It was just after 9 when the headlights swept across the front window. Claire saw them first. She was drying a plate in the kitchen. Luke stood at the stove flipping grilled cheese sandwiches for a late dinner. Jacob was already upstairs, fast asleep, a crumpled soccer jersey still in hand. She froze, hand mid-mouth motion. Luke turned. "You okay?" But Claire didn't respond. She moved to the window. Across the street, a black SUV had pulled up. Tinted windows, engine idling, definitely not a neighborhood car. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, tailored, clipboard in hand. His coat was too pressed for the muddy curb, hair slicked, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The kind of man who didn't knock, he announced. "Stay here," Claire said under her breath. "Yeah, that's not happening," Luke muttered, already heading for the door. The knock came, sharp, confident. Luke cracked it open, blocking the view behind him. "Evening," the man said. "I'm looking for Claire Montgomery." Luke braced his arm on the frame. "And who might you be?" The man flipped open a leather wallet with sleek ID. "Thomas Langley, executive aide to Mr. William Montgomery. I'm here to escort Miss Montgomery home." Claire stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." Langley's eyes locked on hers. "Claire, this detour has gone on long enough. Your father's ready to move past it, but it's time to return. There are expectations." She crossed her arms. "Tell him I'm done living for his expectations." Langley's jaw twitched. "Then you leave me no choice but to contact authorities. You're listed as missing. Technically, this could qualify as unlawful harboring." "She's not missing," Luke said calmly. "She's right here, voluntarily." Langley narrowed his eyes. "And you are?" "Luke Bennett, landlord, father, the guy whose kitchen smells like grilled cheese. Also, the guy you're not intimidating tonight." Claire stepped forward. "Luke." But Luke held his ground, voice low and steady. "You think you can show up, flash a title, and drag her back like she's some runaway socialite? Not gonna happen." Langley's tone cooled. "This is a family matter." "No," Luke shot back. "This is a control matter. She walked away from a name, and you all can't stand that she didn't come crawling back." Claire's breath hitched. Langley tried one last time. "Let me be clear." But Luke stepped onto the porch, rain misting his flannel shirt. "No, let me be clear." He looked Langley dead in the eyes. "She doesn't need a mansion or gold-plated initials. She needs safety, respect, a place where no one measures her by her last name." Another step forward. "She doesn't need a palace. She needs to be a person." Langley faltered, just slightly. Luke's voice dropped. "She's home here, and unless you've got a court order or the guts to come back without hiding behind your boss's name, I suggest you walk away." Silence. Langley adjusted his cuffs. "This isn't over." "I know," Claire said. "That's why he's afraid." Langley turned, walked to the SUV, and drove off. Luke stood there, damp, breathing deep. Inside, Claire watched him, stunned. He stepped in and closed the door. "Hope you still want grilled cheese," he said, trying for lightness. But his voice cracked. Something had shifted. Claire let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. "I do," she whispered. They ate in silence, steam rising, house warm despite the storm. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside, a line had been drawn, not with threats, but with presence. Claire had been defended before by lawyers, assistants, security. But this was different. Tonight she was defended by someone who saw her, not her name. Not out of duty, but because she mattered. Not to a legacy, to him. The first article dropped on a Wednesday. Not front page, not yet, but it spread fast. Montgomery Properties, accused of forcing out low-income families for profit. The story exposed rezoning manipulation, quiet title acquisitions, and shady permits that led to the destruction of Briarwood's community center and public housing. But it didn't name Claire. Not yet. At the kitchen table, she watched the report play on the old TV above the fridge. Her face was calm, but her fingers trembled around her coffee mug. Luke had asked her once, gently, if she was sure. She had nodded. "I've lived behind walls long enough," she said. "It's time someone let the truth in." It took her 3 nights to collect everything, emails, reports, memos. She used Luke's laptop to encrypt and send it to an investigative journalist she trusted. Luke never asked for details. He just left her tea and silence. But that silence didn't last. By Friday, reporters were calling, then showing up. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Cars slowed outside the house. A camera crew even knocked while Jacob ate cereal in his dinosaur pajamas. Claire apologized over and over. Luke only said, "You did the right thing. The rest is just noise." But the noise kept growing. A week later, a black town car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a messenger this time. It was him. Claire spotted her father through the kitchen window, William Montgomery, in a perfectly pressed suit, silver cufflinks gleaming. His presence was commanding, even from across the street. Luke opened the door before he could knock. Montgomery didn't smile. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "I believe we've become entangled." Luke remained silent. "I came to make this simple," he continued, holding out a thick, sealed envelope. "There's enough here to make this go away." Luke didn't touch it. Montgomery's voice tightened. "You're a father. You know what it means to protect your child." Luke stepped forward, quiet but firm. "So do you." He paused. "But it looks like we have different definitions of what a child really needs." Montgomery's expression cracked just slightly. Luke shut the door without another word. That evening, Jacob biked home from school like always. Claire was in the front yard pulling weeds. Luke worked on the porch siding. None of them saw the black sedan until it was too late. The driver, on the phone, drifted too close to the sidewalk. Jacob swerved, lost control, hit the curb hard. The bike flipped. He landed with a sickening thud. Claire screamed. Luke dropped his tools and ran. But Claire was already there. She scooped Jacob into her arms. His head lolled against her shoulder, blood trickling from a gash above his eye. One arm hung limp and twisted. He was conscious, but dazed. The sky opened up with sudden rain as she bolted into the street, barefoot and soaked. A neighbor saw them and threw open a car door. Claire sat with Jacob in the back seat the entire ride, whispering, "You're okay. I've got you. I've got you." At the hospital, she wouldn't let go of him. Not for the nurse, not for anyone. When doctors finally wheeled Jacob away, Claire collapsed outside the ER doors, knees hitting the tile with a dull, echoing thud. She didn't cry out. She folded her hands, lowered her forehead, and shook in silence as if praying, or pleading, or simply breaking. Luke found her minutes later, drenched and pale. He didn't speak, just sat beside her and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Behind the closed doors, machines beeped steadily. Jacob would be okay. A fractured arm, mild concussion, no internal damage. But something deeper had cracked that night. Not Jacob's bones, not just Claire's heart. Something bigger. The illusion that they could stay invisible forever. Because now, the fight between truth and power wasn't just a headline anymore. It had come to their street, to their doorstep, and it had nearly taken their child. The news broke 3 days after Jacob was discharged from the hospital. Claire had barely slept. She stayed at his bedside each night, curled in the recliner with knees tucked beneath a blanket. Luke watched her from the doorway more than once, struck not by the grief in her eyes, but by the fierce protectiveness, the kind that can't be bought or taught, only earned. Then the world shifted. Local headlines became national within hours. Whistleblower exposes massive housing displacement scheme by Montgomery Properties. Exclusive, internal documents suggest coordinated city corruption. Claire's files, now verified and cross-checkered, included memos, signatures, and emails detailing forced gentrification in multiple low-enemy neighborhoods. Properties were undervalued, residents pushed out quietly, and land flipped for luxury development under shell companies. It wasn't just Briarwood, it was a blueprint. By week's end, protests surrounded Montgomery headquarters. Former employees stepped forward. So did displaced families. City council members who had quietly backed Montgomery's initiatives scrambled to explain themselves. Under pressure, William Montgomery held a press conference. He stood in front of American flags, flanked by lawyers, tie slightly askew, the first visible crack in his polished image. With cameras rolling, he cleared his throat and announced his resignation in the interest of public trust. He called the allegations deeply disturbing, promised cooperation, gave no apology. Claire watched it from Luke's couch, Jacob leaning against her, cast covered in doodles and lightning bolts. She didn't cheer, didn't smile. She simply said, "He never thought I'd follow through." Luke handed her a cup of tea. "You did more than follow through," he said. "You stopped him." Claire shook her head. "We stopped him." Word of her identity spread fast. The media painted her as a rebel heiress, a reverse Cinderella, giving up a palace for a porch. Reporters camped outside the house for 2 days. Claire refused interviews, Luke too. They kept their lives small, quiet, close. What surprised them was the neighborhood. It rallied. Mrs. Cortez stood guard on the porch with a broom, shooing away strangers. Pastor Rick brought chili and told reporters to respect real courage. Kids from Jacob's school left drawings in the mailbox that read, "Thank you, Miss Claire." One morning, taped to the front door, was a handwritten sign. This house made history, but more importantly, it made a family. Luke stared at it a long time. Claire didn't return to her old life. There were lawyers, of course, estate advisors, board members, all urging her to reconsider. She had rights to shares, dividends, land. They offered settlements, control, silence. She declined them all. "I don't need power," she said one evening, helping Luke hang laundry in the backyard. "I just need peace." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The warmth between them was no longer unspoken, just unhurried. A closeness born of shared struggle. Daily grace. The slow stitching of trust, where something once torn had begun to heal. Jacob still called them both by name, but sometimes when Claire tucked his blanket or helped with math, he whispered, "Good night, Mom," and she would kiss his forehead without correcting him. It wasn't the world she'd been born into, but it was the one she chose, and for the first time in her life, it was enough. 1 year later, the little house on Pineview Lane still looked the same from the outside. White siding, creaky porch, and a sun-faded welcome mat. But inside, everything had changed. The walls were painted in soft, warm tones. A new couch filled the living room, but Jacob's old, scratched-up coffee table remained. The window that once held a "Room for Rent" sign now displayed a handmade garland of paper hearts and cranes. By the kitchen doorway, where Jacob had marked his height in pencil, hung the original rental receipt, laminated and pinned. Claire Montgomery, $100, 0 cents, paid in full. Luke never took it down. "This was the start of everything," he said. "Feels wrong to pretend it didn't matter." Claire now worked part-time at the Briarwood Art Center, teaching drawing to children who once lived in the neighborhood her father tried to erase. Most mornings, she walked there with Jacob skipping beside her, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She no longer used her last name. To the town, she was just Claire, the one who baked cookies for council meetings, helped paint murals, and read to first graders even when she was off duty. Jacob still called her Miss Claire in public, but at home she packed his lunch, folded his socks, and kissed his forehead goodnight. He looked at her like kids do when they feel completely safe. She and Luke never announced anything, no ring, no titles, but the way she took his coat without asking, or how he brewed her coffee just right, said it all. Their love was quiet, steady, the kind that doesn't need to be declared to be real. That spring, the city hosted a ribbon cutting for a new low-income housing complex built on the grounds of the old Briarwood Center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home for dozens of families. Funded by grants, settlements, and a donation from an anonymous source, the mayor gave a short speech, then invited Claire to the stage. She wore a simple blue dress, the one from her mother's memorial, and her hair was tied back with a ribbon Jacob had picked out. She brought no speech, just 3 small items. First, the laminated receipt. This was the moment I stopped being someone's daughter and became my own person. Next, a wooden key Jacob had carved in art class, the word home etched in crooked letters. the first key I ever received that opened something real. Finally, she unfolded a note, a letter from Luke, left under her tea mug the morning after Jacob's accident. She read it aloud. "If you choose to go back to that world, I'll understand. But if you choose to stay, I'll build one more room onto this house. Not because I need a tenant, but because this home isn't full unless it has you in it." Her voice caught, but she smiled, the same soft smile she wore the night Luke first opened his door to her in the rain. "I used to have everything," she said, "but not a home, not a family. Now, I don't have a name anyone cares about, and I've never felt richer." Applause followed. Jacob ran up and hugged her around the waist. That night, with Jacob asleep upstairs and the dishes done, Claire stood, drying her hands at the sink. Luke came up behind her, pulled out a chair and placed something on the table. A paper ring, folded from waxed paper, the exact spiral she once taught Jacob to make. She raised an eyebrow. "Is this an ambush?" Luke smiled. "It's not gold, no diamonds." No, he said, "just paper, but it'll never tear, as long as I'm the one holding it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You know why this is perfect?" she whispered. Why? Because you know how to hold something fragile without breaking it?" He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had always belonged there. No altar, no audience, just a man, a woman, and a boy upstairs. A family built not by blood, but by choice. She had once been a princess in a house of marble. Now she was a mother, a teacher, a partner. And the only kingdom that mattered was this house, made of grilled cheese, bedtime stories, and quiet courage. All it cost was $100, 0 cents, and the bravery to stay. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you. Hit the hype button if you believe that sometimes the smallest acts, like opening a door or folding a paper ring, can change a life forever. Here we share stories of love, courage, and the families we choose. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and we'll see you in the next soul-stirring story.
"My daddy wants to marry you," says the little homeless girl. And the millionaire woman pauses, then makes a decision. Before we dive in, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night, you're exactly where you need to be. The November rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of Victoria Sterling's corner office on the 47th floor of Sterling Enterprises. At 34, she commanded a billion-dollar empire with the same cold precision that had earned her the nickname Ice Queen on Wall Street. Her Armani suit was flawless, her makeup impeccable, her heart carefully locked away behind years of calculated decisions. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Sterling, there's a situation in the lobby." Victoria didn't look up from her quarterly reports. "Handle it, Margaret." "Ma'am, it's a child. Security doesn't know what to do." Victoria's pen stopped mid-signature. Children didn't belong in her world of mergers and acquisitions. "What kind of child?" "A little girl, maybe 6 years old. She's asking for you specifically." Something cold gripped Victoria's chest. In her 15-year career, no child had ever asked for her. She stood, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked to the elevator. The descent felt endless, each floor bringing her closer to something that would shatter her carefully constructed world. The lobby was a monument to corporate success, Italian marble, crystal chandeliers, and intimidating security guards. But all eyes were focused on a tiny figure sitting cross-legged on the floor near the reception desk. The little girl wore clothes that had seen better days. A faded pink sweater with holes, jeans that were too big, and sneakers held together with duct tape. Her dark hair was tangled, her face smudged with dirt, but her green eyes burned with a determination that made Victoria's breath catch. "Are you the lady who owns this big building?" the child asked, looking up at Victoria without fear. Victoria knelt slowly, her expensive suit forgotten. "I am. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma. Emma Rodriguez." The little girl's voice was clear despite her obvious exhaustion. "My daddy says you're the most important person in the whole city." "And where is your daddy?" Emma's face crumpled slightly. "He's sick, real sick. The doctors say." She swallowed hard, trying to be brave. "They say he might go to heaven soon." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. "Emma, where have you been staying?" "Sometimes in Daddy's truck when he was working. Sometimes in the shelter. But Daddy got too sick to work. And they took the truck away." Emma's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "We've been sleeping in the park, but it's getting cold." The lobby had gone completely silent. Victoria was aware of her employees watching, of security hovering nearby, of the weight of this moment. She should call child services. She should handle this through proper channels. She should maintain her professional distance. Instead, she found herself asking, "Emma, why did you come here? How do you even know who I am?" Emma reached into her small backpack, her only possession, and pulled out a crumpled newspaper clipping. It was from the business section. A photo of Victoria receiving an award for Businesswoman of the Year. Someone had circled her face in red crayon. "Daddy showed me this picture. He said you help people with money problems. He said, maybe..." Emma's voice broke. "Maybe you could help us too." Victoria stared at the newspaper clipping, her hands trembling. "What exactly did your daddy tell you to say, Emma?" The little girl took a deep breath, as if she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. "He said to tell you that he knows he's gonna die, and he don't want me to be alone. He said to ask if..." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "If maybe you could take care of me." The lobby seemed to tilt around Victoria. "Emma, that's a very big thing to ask." "Daddy wants to marry you," Emma blurted out, her cheeks flushing red. "He said if you married him, you could be my mommy forever, even after he goes to heaven. He said you look like someone who needs a family as much as we do." Victoria's world stopped. In 6 simple words from a homeless child, everything she thought she knew about herself came crashing down. Victoria's hands shook as she stared at the little girl, whose innocent words had just turned her world upside down. Around them, the Sterling Enterprises lobby had fallen into an eerie silence, broken only by the distant hum of elevators and the November rain against the windows. "Emma," Victoria said carefully, "where is your daddy right now?" "St. Mary's Hospital, room 314, Emma recited. "He made me memorize it." Her small fingers fumbled with the newspaper clipping. "He said if something happened to him, I should come find you and tell you he loves you already, even though you never met." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She'd built her empire on logic, on calculated risks, on never making decisions based on emotion. But here was this 6-year-old girl talking about love and marriage and death, with the matter-of-fact acceptance that only children possess. "Ms. Sterling?" Margaret's voice came through her earpiece. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Victoria touched her earpiece, her eyes never leaving Emma. "Cancel it. Cancel everything for the rest of the day." She watched Emma's face light up with hope, and something inside Victoria's chest cracked wider. This child, this beautiful, brave, heartbroken child, had walked into her corporate fortress and asked for the impossible. And the most terrifying part was that Victoria found herself wanting to say yes. "Emma, when did you last eat?" The little girl's stomach answered with a loud rumble. She blushed. "Yesterday morning. The shelter gave us breakfast, but then Daddy got really sick and the ambulance came." Victoria stood, her decision crystallizing with each passing second. "Richard," she called to her head of security, "bring my car around, and call ahead to St. Mary's. Tell them Victoria Sterling is coming to see a patient." "Yes." "Ma'am, should I also call legal about the child?" Victoria looked down at Emma, who was watching her with those impossibly hopeful green eyes. "Not yet. First, I need to meet her father. As they waited for the car, Victoria found herself studying Emma's face. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, there was something luminous about this child. She had the kind of spirit that Victoria had buried years ago under business suits and board meetings. Emma, can you tell me about your daddy? The little girl's face transformed with pure love. His name is Miguel Rodriguez. He's 32, and he's the best daddy in the whole world. He builds things, big buildings like this one. He taught me to read and to count to 100. He makes the best pancakes, and he sings me to sleep every night. Emma's voice caught. But he's been coughing a lot, and there's blood sometimes. The doctors say his lungs are sick from working in dusty places. They say there's nothing they can do. Victoria felt tears threatening. Tears she hadn't allowed herself in 15 years. And he sent you to me? He said he's been watching you in the newspapers for years. He said you're strong and smart and successful, but that you look lonely in all your pictures. He said maybe God put your picture in front of him because you need us as much as we need you. The black Mercedes pulled up outside. As Victoria helped Emma into the leather seats, she caught her reflection in the window. For the first time in years, she saw what Miguel Rodriguez had seen: the loneliness behind the success, the emptiness behind the empire. Emma, what if your daddy's wrong? What if I'm not the kind of person who can take care of a little girl? Emma buckled her seatbelt with practiced efficiency. Daddy says sometimes the best families aren't born. They're chosen. He chose you before he even met you. As the Mercedes pulled into traffic, Victoria realized she was about to meet the man who had somehow seen through her carefully constructed facade to the woman underneath. A dying man who was offering her the one thing her billions couldn't buy: a real family. But first she had to understand how a construction worker she'd never met could know her better than she knew herself. St. Mary's Hospital smelled of disinfectant and hope. Victoria had been in hospitals before, for board meetings with healthcare companies, charity photo opportunities, sterile business transactions. But walking through these halls with Emma's small hand in hers felt different. This felt personal. Room 314 was at the end of a long corridor. Through the partially open door, Victoria could see a man lying in the hospital bed, his dark hair damp with fever, his breathing labored. Even in his weakened state, Miguel Rodriguez was handsome, not the polished attractiveness of the men in Victoria's social circle, but something real and honest that made her pulse quicken. "Daddy!" Emma burst through the door, climbing carefully onto the bed beside him. Miguel's eyes opened, and when he saw his daughter, his whole face transformed with love. "Mi pequeña princesa, you came back." His voice was hoarse, accented with the rhythm of his heritage. Then his gaze moved to Victoria, and she felt the full force of his attention. "And you brought her," he whispered, wonder in his voice. Victoria stood frozen in the doorway, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her designer suit, her perfectly styled hair, her manicured nails. She was a boardroom predator in a place of genuine human suffering. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm Victoria Sterling. Your daughter came to see me today." Miguel struggled to sit up, and Victoria found herself moving forward to help him. The moment their hands touched, she felt an electric shock of connection that had nothing to do with static electricity. "Please call me Miguel, and thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Victoria pulled a chair close to the bed, acutely aware that this was the most intimate conversation she'd had in years. "Miguel, Emma said some things today that I need to understand, about marriage, about family." Miguel's eyes dropped to his daughter, who was curled against his side like a small kitten. "I know how it sounds. A dying man sending his 6-year-old daughter to propose to a stranger." He looked back at Victoria. "But I've been watching you for 3 years, Victoria Sterling." "Watching me?" "My construction crew worked on the Morrison building renovation, right across from your office tower. Every day for 8 months I could see you in your office window. You worked late, you worked weekends, you never seemed to leave." Victoria felt exposed, as if he'd been seeing her in her most private moments. "I started reading about you," Miguel continued. "Your business achievements, your charity work, your interviews. And in every photo, I saw the same thing: someone who had everything but was desperately alone. "You don't know anything about my life," Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know you've never been married. I know you don't have children. I know you built an empire but forgot to build a life." Miguel's voice was gentle, but unflinching. "I know because I was the same way after Emma's mother died. Work became everything because it was easier than feeling the emptiness." Emma had fallen asleep against her father's chest, her small face peaceful in a way that made Victoria's heart ache. "But Emma changed that," Miguel continued softly. "She taught me that success without love is just another kind of poverty. And now I'm dying, and my greatest fear isn't death, it's leaving her alone." Victoria stared at this man who spoke about death with such calm acceptance. "Miguel, there are proper channels. Foster care, adoption agencies. Would you put Emma in foster care?" Miguel asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Victoria looked at the sleeping child, imagining her in some sterile government facility, and felt her heart clench. "I've been watching you for 3 years," Miguel repeated. "I've seen how you treat your employees, how you fight for the underdog in your business deals, how you donate anonymously to children's charities. I've seen your heart, Victoria, even if you've forgotten it exists. You're asking me to marry a man I just met to adopt a child I've known for 2 hours." Miguel smiled, and despite his illness, it was radiant. "I'm asking you to save my daughter. The marriage would be legal only just to make sure Emma is protected, that she inherits whatever rights a widow would have. After I'm gone, you'd be free to live your life however you choose. And if I say no?" Pain flickered across Miguel's face. "Then I'll die knowing I tried everything to keep my daughter safe." Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, full of strangers living their separate lives. She'd always thought that was enough. But Emma's small voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes the best families aren't born, they're chosen. When she turned back, Miguel was watching her with eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "How long do you have?" she asked quietly. "The doctors say days, maybe a week." Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision that would change everything. When she opened them, Miguel was still watching her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before, complete faith in her goodness. "I need time to think." Miguel nodded. "Time is the one thing I can't give you much of." Victoria spent the night in her penthouse apartment, staring out at the city lights and trying to make sense of what Miguel Rodriguez was asking of her. She'd paced the marble floors until dawn, her mind spinning between logic and emotion, between fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. At 7 a.m. she was back in her office, but for the first time in her career, she couldn't focus on work. Every time she tried to read a contract, she saw Emma's hopeful green eyes. Every time she started to make a phone call, she heard Miguel's voice saying, "I've seen your heart, Victoria, even if you've forgotten it exists." "Ms. Sterling?" Margaret appeared in the doorway. "You have the Henderson merger at 9, the board presentation at 11. Cancel everything," Victoria said without looking up from her desk. "Ma'am? Cancel everything for the rest of the week, and Margaret, call my lawyer, tell him I need to see him immediately. It's about adoption procedures and marriage licenses." Margaret's eyebrows shot up, but she was too professional to ask questions. After she left, Victoria sat alone with the weight of her decision. She was considering marrying a dying man to adopt his child, a decision that defied every principle of careful planning that had governed her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Victoria, Daddy is asking for you. Please come." "Emma, nurse helped me write this." Victoria's heart clenched. She grabbed her coat and was out the door before she could second-guess herself. At the hospital, she found Miguel much weaker than the day before. His breathing was more labored, his skin pale and clammy. But his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You came back," he whispered. Emma was curled in the chair beside his bed, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. She'd been given a hospital gown that was far too big, making her look even smaller and more vulnerable. "How are you feeling?" Victoria asked Miguel, though the answer was obvious. "Like I'm running out of time." He struggled to sit up. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." She nodded, settling into the chair across from Emma. If something happens to me today, tonight, will Emma be alone? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. She looked at the little girl who was pretending to read a picture book but was clearly listening to every word. Miguel, I've been thinking about what you asked. That's not what I'm asking now. His voice was urgent, desperate. Right now, if I die in the next few hours, what happens to Emma? Will she be put in the system? Will she be alone and scared? Victoria felt something break open inside her chest. No, she heard herself say. No, she won't be alone. Miguel's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. That's all I needed to know. Emma looked up from her book. Does that mean you're going to be my new mommy? Victoria's mouth went dry. She looked from Emma to Miguel, realizing that somewhere in the last 24 hours, her careful, logical world had been completely overthrown by a dying man and his 6-year-old daughter. Emma, Victoria said slowly, if you could have anything in the world, what would it be? For Daddy not to be sick? Emma said immediately. But if that can't happen, then I want to stay with you. Daddy says you're lonely like we were, and maybe we could not be lonely together. The simple wisdom of a 6-year-old cut straight through all of Victoria's careful analysis. This wasn't about business plans or risk assessment. This was about a little girl who needed a mother and a woman who had forgotten how to be human. Miguel, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. If we do this, if we get married, I want you to know it won't just be a legal arrangement. Emma won't just be a responsibility I've taken on. She'll be my daughter. Completely. Forever. Tears started flowing down Miguel's cheeks. Victoria, and I want you to know that even though we've just met, even though this is crazy and impossible and goes against everything I've ever believed about careful decision-making, Victoria paused, surprised by her own words. I can see why Emma loves you so much. You're a good man, Miguel Rodriguez. Emma scrambled out of her chair and climbed into Victoria's lap, wrapping her small arms around her neck. Does this mean you're saying yes? Victoria held the little girl close, breathing in the scent of hospital soap and innocence. Over Emma's head, she met Miguel's grateful gaze. Yes, sweetheart. I'm saying yes. Miguel closed his eyes, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked peaceful. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me the one thing I wanted most in the world, knowing that Emma will be loved. Victoria felt tears on her cheeks, tears she hadn't allowed herself in 15 years. Miguel, I need you to know something too. You and Emma, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. What's that? Victoria looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in her arms, trusting and content. A reason to come home. The courthouse wedding was unlike anything Victoria had ever imagined for herself. No designer gown, no orchestra, no society photographers. Just Miguel in a wheelchair, wearing his one good shirt. Emma in a yellow dress that a kind nurse had brought from home. And Victoria in a simple blue suit she'd grabbed from her closet without thinking. Judge Patricia Williams had agreed to perform the ceremony in Miguel's hospital room when Victoria explained the circumstances. Miguel's doctor, Dr. Sarah Chen, served as one witness, while Margaret, who had insisted on coming despite Victoria's protests, served as the other. Do you, Miguel Rodriguez, take Victoria Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife? Judge Williams asked gently. Miguel's voice was weak but clear. I do, and I promise to love and protect her for whatever time I have left. Victoria's hands trembled as she held Miguel's. His fingers were thin and cold, but his grip was steady. Do you, Victoria Sterling, take Miguel Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded husband? Victoria looked into Miguel's eyes and saw a lifetime of love compressed into whatever time they had left. I do, and I promise to love and protect Emma as if she were my own daughter for as long as I live. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Miguel squeezed Victoria's hand. May I kiss my bride? The kiss was gentle, tender, and heartbreaking. Victoria tasted salt and realized they were both crying. Mommy, Victoria! Emma cheered, clapping her hands. Now we're a real family. Victoria knelt beside Emma's chair. and the little girl threw her arms around her neck. "Yes, sweetheart. Now we're a real family." The paperwork took another hour. Adoption forms, insurance changes, legal guardianship documents. Victoria's lawyer, James Morrison, had worked through the night to expedite everything. As she signed paper after paper, Victoria realized she was legally binding herself to two people she'd known for less than 3 days. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt more certain of this decision than any she'd made in her corporate career. That evening, Miguel insisted on being moved to a chair by the window so he could watch the sunset with his new family. Emma was curled in Victoria's lap, her head against Victoria's shoulder while Victoria held Miguel's hand. "Tell me about your childhood," Miguel said softly. "I want to know who Emma's new mother really is." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "There's not much to tell. My parents died in a car accident when I was 12. I went to live with my aunt, who was practical. She made sure I had food and shelter and education, but there wasn't much warmth. I learned early that if I wanted something, I had to work for it myself. Is that why you work so hard?" "I suppose. Work was safe, predictable. If I put in effort, I got results. People were more complicated." Miguel lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles. "Emma's not complicated. She's just a little girl who wants to be loved." "I can see that." Victoria looked down at Emma, who was fighting sleep. "Miguel, I have to ask, are you afraid? Of dying?" "Sometimes, but not of leaving Emma anymore. You've given me peace, Victoria. I don't know how to be a mother. You don't have to know. You just have to love her. The rest, you'll figure out together." Emma stirred in Victoria's arms. "Daddy, are you going to heaven soon?" Miguel's face crumpled, but he kept his voice steady. "Yes, mi amor, but I want you to remember something important. Even when I'm in heaven, I'll still be your daddy. And now you have Mommy Victoria to take care of you. Will you watch over us from heaven? Every single day. And whenever you need me, you just have to look up at the stars and remember how much I love you." Emma sat up in Victoria's lap and reached for her father. Miguel gathered his daughter close, and Victoria watched as he whispered something in her ear that made her giggle through her tears. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep in the chair beside Miguel's bed, Victoria and Miguel talked quietly about practical things: Emma's favorite foods, her bedtime routine, her fears and dreams. But underneath the logistics was something deeper. Two strangers learning to trust each other with the most precious thing in the world. "Victoria," Miguel said as the night grew deeper, "I need to tell you something. I'm not a wealthy man. I don't have much to leave Emma except a small savings account in this." He reached under his pillow and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond, clearly not expensive but polished with care. "It was my mother's. I've been saving it for Emma's wedding day, but I want you to have it now. You're her mother now, and when the time comes, you can give it to her." Victoria's throat tightened. "Miguel, I can't. Please. It's the only family heirloom I have to give, and your family now." Victoria slipped the ring onto her right hand, where it felt both foreign and somehow right. "I'll keep it safe for her." "I know you will. You're going to be an amazing mother, Victoria Sterling Rodriguez." "Rodriguez?" Miguel smiled. "If you want. Emma would like that, having the same last name as her new mother." Victoria tested the sound of it in her mind. Victoria Rodriguez. It felt like stepping into a completely different life. As dawn approached, Miguel grew quieter, more tired. But his eyes never left Victoria's face, as if he was memorizing her for eternity. "Thank you," he whispered as the sun began to rise. "Thank you for saying yes to love." Miguel Rodriguez died 3 days later, just as the autumn leaves were beginning to turn. Victoria had never watched someone die before, and she was unprepared for how peaceful it could be. He simply stopped breathing while holding both Victoria's hand and Emma's, a smile on his face as if he'd seen something beautiful just beyond their vision. Emma was remarkably composed for a 6-year-old. She kissed her father's forehead and whispered, "I love you, Daddy. Take care of Mommy up in heaven." before turning to Victoria with solemn eyes. Now it's just us. Mommy Victoria. The funeral was small but meaningful. Word had somehow spread through the construction community, and dozens of workers showed up in their best clothes to pay respects to Miguel Rodriguez. Victoria was surprised to learn how many lives he'd touched, men who spoke of his kindness, his work ethic, his devotion to his daughter. Miguel was the kind of man who would give you his last dollar if you needed it, said Frank Castellano, the foreman from Miguel's last job. He talked about Emma every day, and these past few weeks, he talked about you too, Mrs. Rodriguez. He said God had finally answered his prayers. Victoria, who was still adjusting to being called Mrs. Rodriguez, found herself surrounded by people who had loved her husband. It was a strange comfort learning about Miguel through their stories, understanding the man she'd married in his final days. The most surprising visitor was Dr. Chen, who approached Victoria after the service. Mrs. Rodriguez, I wanted you to know that in 15 years of treating terminal patients, I've never seen anyone face death with such peace. Miguel told me it was because he knew Emma would be loved. You gave him the greatest gift possible. That evening, Victoria and Emma sat in Victoria's penthouse apartment, which would now be Emma's home too. The space that had once felt like a minimalist sanctuary now seemed cold and unwelcoming. Everything was white marble and sharp edges, beautiful, but not built for a child. Mommy Victoria? Emma was curled against Victoria's side on the enormous white sofa, looking impossibly small in the vast living room. Yes, sweetheart? Can we make pancakes tomorrow? Daddy used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. Victoria realized she'd never made pancakes in her life. Her breakfast was usually coffee and a protein bar eaten while reviewing reports. I'd love to make pancakes with you. You'll have to teach me how. Emma giggled. Daddy said you might not know how to cook. He said that's okay because we could learn together. What else did Daddy say about me? Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. He said you were like a beautiful ice princess who forgot how to smile. But he said if someone loved you enough, the ice would melt and you'd remember how to be happy. Victoria felt tears starting again. And what do you think? Am I an ice princess? Emma looked up at her seriously. I think you're just sad. But I'm going to help you not be sad anymore. How are you going to do that? By hugging you lots and lots until you remember how good it feels. As if to demonstrate, Emma wrapped her small arms around Victoria's waist and squeezed tight. Victoria held her new daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering smell of the hospital soap that clung to her clothes. Emma, I want you to know that you can ask me anything. Tell me anything. If you're scared or sad or angry, I want you to talk to me. I'm not scared, Emma said confidently. Daddy told me you were brave enough to take care of both of us. Both of us? You and me. He said you needed taking care of too, just like I do. Just in different ways. The wisdom of this 6-year-old continued to astound Victoria. She was beginning to understand that she hadn't just adopted Emma. Emma had adopted her right back. Mommy Victoria? Yes? Tomorrow can we go shopping for my new room? This place is really pretty, but it doesn't look like a place where kids live. Victoria looked around her pristine apartment and realized Emma was absolutely right. What would make it look like a place where kids live? Colors. And toys and pictures on the refrigerator, and maybe a big soft carpet where we can sit and play games. Victoria smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Miguel's death. Then that's exactly what we'll do. As Emma fell asleep in Victoria's arms, Victoria stared out at the city lights and thought about how completely her life had changed. A week ago, she'd been a successful but lonely businesswoman. Now she was a widow and a mother, responsible for a little girl who seemed determined to heal Victoria's heart, while Victoria protected hers. She thought about Miguel's words. Sometimes the best families aren't born, they're chosen. Looking down at Emma's peaceful face, Victoria finally understood what he'd meant. This wasn't just about giving Emma a home. This was about both of them choosing to build something beautiful from the pieces of their broken worlds. Thank you, Miguel, she whispered into the darkness. Thank you for choosing us. Outside, the city hummed with 8 million separate lives. But inside the penthouse, Victoria Rodriguez held her daughter close and finally felt like she was home. 6 months later, Victoria's penthouse had transformed into something unrecognizable. Gone were the stark white walls and minimalist furniture. In their place were splashes of color, Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator, a rainbow-colored carpet in the living room, and toys scattered in organized chaos throughout the space. Victoria had also transformed. The Ice Queen of Wall Street now attended every parent-teacher conference, knew the names of all Emma's classmates, and had learned to make pancakes that were only slightly burnt. She'd even taken Fridays off to spend with Emma, something that would have been unthinkable before. But success in business hadn't prepared Victoria for the complexities of motherhood. Emma was thriving, but Victoria struggled with moments of doubt that struck without warning. "Mommy Victoria, why don't I look like you?" Emma asked one morning as Victoria braided her dark hair before school. Victoria's hand stilled. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Jenny at school says families are supposed to look alike. She says I can't really be your daughter because you're white and I'm brown." Victoria felt a surge of protective anger. "Emma, look at me." She turned Emma's chair so they faced each other. "You are my daughter in every way that matters. Family isn't about looking the same, it's about loving each other. But what if people ask questions? Then we'll tell them the truth. That Daddy chose me to be your mother because he loved us both." Victoria cupped Emma's face gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Emma Rodriguez, don't ever let anyone make you think differently." Emma smiled, but Victoria could see the confusion still lingering in her eyes. It was their first real confrontation with the outside world's perception of their unconventional family. That afternoon, Victoria was in her office when Margaret buzzed her. "Ms. Rodriguez, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about Emma." Victoria's blood went cold. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her 50s, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Sandra Collins from Child Protective Services. I'd like to discuss your adoption of Emma Rodriguez." Victoria's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Please sit down. How can I help you? We've received some concerns about the circumstances of your marriage to Miguel Rodriguez and the subsequent adoption. The timeline was unusual." "Unusual how?" "You married a man you'd known for 3 days, Mrs. Rodriguez. He died within a week of the ceremony. Some people might question the legitimacy of such an arrangement." Victoria felt ice forming in her veins, not the protective ice of her former self, but the terrifying ice of potentially losing Emma. "Who raised these concerns?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but I need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Miguel and your preparedness to care for Emma." For the next hour, Victoria answered probing questions about her marriage, her motivations, her parenting experience. Sandra Collins took notes, her expression neutral but watchful. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'll be frank with you. The speed of this adoption raises red flags. Wealthy individuals sometimes enter into arrangements that aren't in the child's best interest." "Are you suggesting I bought Emma?" "I'm suggesting that grief can lead to impulsive decisions. Miguel Rodriguez was dying, perhaps he wasn't thinking clearly." Victoria stood abruptly. "Ms. Collins, Miguel Rodriguez was one of the most clear-thinking people I've ever met. He made a decision based on love for his daughter, and every day since then has proven he was right. Nevertheless, we need to ensure Emma's well-being. I'll be conducting a formal investigation, including interviews with Emma, her teachers, and your household staff." After Sandra Collins left, Victoria sat alone in her office, her hands shaking. She'd faced hostile takeovers, congressional hearings, and SEC investigations, but none of those compared to the terror of potentially losing Emma. She called Emma's school. "This is Victoria Rodriguez. I need to pick up Emma early today." "Is everything all right, Mrs. Rodriguez?" "Yes, just a family matter." But everything wasn't all right. As Victoria drove to the school, she realized that their happiness, so carefully built over the past 6 months, was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. When Emma climbed into the car chattering about her day, Victoria made a decision. She wouldn't tell Emma about the CPS investigation. Not yet. But she would fight for their family with everything she had. Mommy Victoria, you look worried. Are you okay? Victoria glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma's concerned face. I'm fine, sweetheart, just thinking about how much I love you. I love you too. Forever and ever, just like Daddy said. Victoria's throat tightened. Emma, if anyone ever asks you questions about our family, about Daddy, or about me, I want you to tell them the truth. That we love each other, that we take care of each other, and that we're happy together. Okay, but why would anyone ask questions? Sometimes adults ask lots of questions when they meet families like ours. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. They just want to make sure everyone is happy and safe. Emma nodded sagely. Like when the doctor asks if anything hurts? Exactly like that. But as they drove home through the busy streets, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect little world was about to face its biggest challenge yet. Someone was questioning their family, and she had no idea who or why. What she did know was that she would fight for Emma with the same ruthlessness she'd once brought to business deals. Because Emma wasn't just her daughter now, she was her heart, walking around outside her body, and Victoria would protect her heart at any cost. The investigation began in earnest the following week. Sandra Collins arrived at their apartment with another social worker, a man named David Park, and spent 3 hours examining every room, checking Emma's living conditions, reviewing her medical and school records. Victoria watched them inspect Emma's bedroom, now painted a cheerful yellow with clouds on the ceiling that Miguel had described to Emma before he died. They noted the educational toys, the bookshelf full of children's literature, the photos of Emma and Miguel that Victoria had framed and displayed prominently. Mrs. Rodriguez, David Park said, your financial resources are obviously substantial, but we're more interested in the emotional support you're providing. What would you like to know? How do you handle discipline? What's Emma's routine? How are you addressing her grief over her father's death? Victoria answered each question carefully, aware that everything she said was being evaluated. She described their morning routine, their weekend activities, the child psychologist she'd found to help Emma process her grief. And your own grief, Mrs. Rodriguez? Losing a spouse even after such a brief marriage must be difficult. Victoria paused. She'd been so focused on helping Emma heal that she'd barely acknowledged her own sense of loss. Miguel was a remarkable man. I may not have known him long, but I grew to care for him deeply. Losing him was difficult. Do you ever regret your decision? The responsibility of raising a child alone? Never. Victoria's voice was firm. Emma is the best part of my life. When they interviewed Emma separately, Victoria paced her office like a caged animal. Margaret brought her coffee, which went cold as Victoria stared out at the city and imagined all the ways this could go wrong. Mrs. Rodriguez? Sandra Collins appeared in her doorway. We'd like to speak with you about what Emma told us. Victoria's heart stopped. What did she say? She's very articulate for a 6-year-old. She told us about her father's death, about living with you, about her school. But she also said something interesting about why her father chose you. What did she say? She said her father told her that God puts lonely people together so they can take care of each other. She said you were lonely before, but now you smile all the time. Victoria felt tears threatening. Emma is a very wise little girl. She also said you cry sometimes when you think she's not looking, particularly when you're looking at photos of her father. Victoria sat down heavily. I suppose I do. Mrs. Rodriguez, grief is normal. But we need to know that your emotional state isn't affecting your ability to care for Emma. It's not affecting my care for Emma. If anything, missing Miguel makes me more determined to honor his trust in me. David Park consulted his notes. Emma also mentioned that you've been learning Spanish so you can teach her about her father's culture. That you've been taking her to the church Miguel attended. Emma shouldn't lose connection to her heritage. Miguel was proud of his culture, and I want Emma to be proud of it too. Sandra Collins and David Park exchanged a look. Mrs. Rodriguez, we'll be honest with you. When we first received this complaint, we were prepared to find a problematic situation, a wealthy woman acquiring a child through questionable means. Victoria's stomach clenched. And what did you find? We found a child who is clearly loved and well cared for. A woman who has completely reorganized her life around a little girl's needs. And a family that, while unconventional, appears to be thriving. Victoria felt her knees go weak with relief. However, Sandra Collins continued, we still need to identify who made the original complaint and why. Someone is questioning the legitimacy of your family, and we need to understand their concerns. Do you have any idea who it might be? We're looking into it. In the meantime, we'll be filing a preliminary report recommending that Emma remain in your care. But Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to warn you. If someone is determined to challenge your custody, this may not be over. That evening, Victoria sat with Emma on their colorful carpet, helping with homework. Emma was practicing writing her name, tongue sticking out in concentration as she formed each letter. Mommy Victoria, what does investigate mean? Victoria's pen slipped. Where did you hear that word? The nice lady today said they were investigating our family. Is that bad? Victoria set down her own papers and pulled Emma into her lap. Sometimes, sweetheart, when adults don't understand something, they ask lots of questions to make sure everything is okay. They were just making sure you're happy and safe with me. Are you going to send me away? Never, Victoria said fiercely. Never, ever, ever. You are my daughter, Emma Rodriguez, and no one is going to change that. Emma relaxed against her. Good, because I don't want to live anywhere else. I want to stay with you forever. Forever and ever, Victoria whispered, holding her daughter close. But even as she made that promise, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that someone out there was working very hard to tear their family apart. And until she knew who and why, Emma would never be completely safe. The investigation had cleared them for now, but Victoria's business instincts told her this was just the beginning. Someone had targeted their family specifically, and they wouldn't give up easily. She just hoped that whatever was coming, she'd be strong enough to protect the little girl who had become her whole world. The answer came 2 weeks later in the form of a legal document delivered to Victoria's office. Margaret brought it in with a grave expression, and Victoria's blood turned to ice as she read the letterhead. Whitmore, Associates Family Law. Petition for review of custody arrangement, the document read. Filed by Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, grandmother of minor child Emma Rodriguez. Victoria's hands shook as she read further. Elena Rodriguez, Miguel's mother, was challenging Emma's adoption, claiming that the marriage had been fraudulent and that Emma should be placed with her blood family instead of remaining with Victoria. Get James Morrison on the phone immediately, Victoria told Margaret, and cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day. James Morrison, Victoria's attorney, arrived within an hour, his usually calm demeanor clearly strained. Victoria, this is serious. Elena Rodriguez has hired one of the best family law firms in the city. They're claiming that Miguel was not of sound mind when he arranged the marriage, and that you took advantage of a dying man. That's ridiculous. Miguel was completely lucid. You met him. You saw the whole thing. I know that, and you know that. But Elena Rodriguez is claiming that her son never mentioned you before his final illness. That the whole arrangement was sudden and suspicious. Victoria paced her office, her mind racing. What does she want? Full custody of Emma. She's arguing that blood relatives should have priority, especially when the adoption circumstances are questionable. Has she had any contact with Emma? With Miguel? James consulted his notes. According to the filing, Elena Rodriguez had been estranged from her son for several years following a disagreement about Emma's upbringing after her mother died. She claims she tried to reconcile, but Miguel refused her attempts. Victoria felt a chill of understanding. She's using this as a way to get Emma back after Miguel kept her away. It appears so. And Victoria, there's something else. Elena Rodriguez has been in contact with Child Protective Services. She's the one who filed the original complaint. The betrayal hit Victoria like a physical blow. While she'd been building a life with Emma, Miguel's mother had been working to destroy it. What are our chances? James was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, it's going to be difficult. Family courts traditionally favor blood relatives, especially grandparents. and the circumstances of your marriage are going to be scrutinized heavily. But Miguel chose me. He specifically chose me over his mother. We'll need to prove that. We'll need character witnesses, documentation of Miguel's state of mind, evidence that the marriage was genuine rather than a legal convenience. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Emma's school. Mrs. Rodriguez, please call immediately regarding Emma. Victoria's heart stopped. James, I have to go. Something's wrong at Emma's school. The drive to Emma's school felt endless. Victoria's mind conjured dozens of scenarios, each worse than the last. When she arrived, she was directed to the principal's office, where she found Emma sitting in a chair, tears streaming down her face. Emma, what happened? Emma launched herself into Victoria's arms. Mommy, Victoria, there was a lady here. She said she was my real grandmother and that I was going to come live with her. Victoria felt rage unlike anything she'd ever experienced. What lady? Where is she now? Principal Martinez, a kind woman in her 50s, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Rodriguez, a woman named Elena Rodriguez, came to the school claiming to be Emma's grandmother. She had some legal documents, but when we called to verify with you, she left. She can't just take Emma from school. We understand that, which is why we called you immediately. But Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma was very upset by the encounter. The woman apparently told her that you weren't her real mother and that she belonged with her real family. Victoria knelt in front of Emma, whose small face was blotchy with tears. Emma, sweetheart, look at me. You are my real daughter. No matter what anyone says, no matter what papers they have, you are mine and I am yours. But she said Daddy was her son, and that makes her my real grandma. Victoria's heart ached for the confusion in Emma's voice. Yes, she is Daddy's mother. But Emma, do you remember what Daddy told you about families? Emma nodded slowly. That the best families are chosen. That's right. And Daddy chose me to be your mother. Not because I had to be, but because he wanted me to be. Are you going to send me away? Never. Never, ever, ever. Victoria pulled Emma close. I don't care what any court says, what any lawyer says, what any grandmother says. You are my daughter, and I will fight for you with everything I have. But even as she made that fierce promise, Victoria realized that their fight had just begun. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just challenging their legal arrangement. She was trying to destroy Emma's sense of security and belonging, and she'd just proven she was willing to traumatize a 6-year-old to get what she wanted. Victoria held Emma tighter, her mind already calculating her next moves. She'd built a business empire by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than her competitors. Now she'd use those same skills to protect her daughter. Elena Rodriguez wanted a fight? She was about to get one. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. But Elena Rodriguez wasn't waiting. She'd hired a private investigator who began following Victoria and Emma, documenting their daily routine, looking for any crack in Victoria's parenting that could be exploited. Victoria became aware of the surveillance when Emma pointed out the same car that keeps driving by our building. The violation of their privacy made Victoria furious, but James advised patience. Let them watch, he said. They'll see a devoted mother caring for a happy child. That works in our favor. But the stress was taking its toll on Emma. She'd become clingy, afraid to go to school, worried that the mean lady would come back. Victoria had to hire additional security and inform the school that under no circumstances was Emma to be released to anyone except Victoria herself. Mommy Victoria, Emma said one night as Victoria tucked her into bed, what if the judge says I have to go live with that lady? Victoria sat on the edge of Emma's bed, choosing her words carefully. Emma, do you remember when Daddy was in the hospital and he asked me to take care of you? Yes. He made me promise that no matter what happened, I would always keep you safe and loved, and I've never broken a promise in my life. But what if? No what ifs, sweetheart. You are my daughter. I am your mother. Nothing and no one is going to change that. But privately, Victoria was terrified. Elena Rodriguez had resources, family law on her side, and a blood connection that courts traditionally honored. Worse, she was willing to hurt Emma to get what she wanted. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Frank Castellano, Miguel's former foreman, called Victoria directly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I heard about the custody thing. I wanted you to know something about Miguel's mother." "What about her?" "Miguel never talked about her much. But when he did, it wasn't good. She tried to take Emma away from him after Maria died. Said he couldn't raise a daughter alone. There were lawyers involved. Miguel had to get a restraining order." Victoria's heart raced. "A restraining order?" "Yeah. Elena was trying to prove Miguel was an unfit father. She called child services on him multiple times, made false reports. Miguel finally had enough and cut her off completely." "Frank, would you be willing to testify about this?" "Absolutely. Miguel was a good man and a great father, and he chose you for a reason, Mrs. Rodriguez. Elena Rodriguez doesn't care about Emma, she just wants to win." Victoria immediately called James with this information. Within hours, he'd subpoenaed the records from Miguel's previous custody battle with his mother. What they found was damning. Elena Rodriguez had a history of harassment, false accusations, and attempts to manipulate the system. The restraining order was still technically in effect at the time of Miguel's death. She'd been specifically prohibited from unsupervised contact with Emma. "This changes everything," James said. "Elena violated a court order by approaching Emma at school, and her history of false accusations against Miguel will seriously damage her credibility." But Elena Rodriguez wasn't finished. 2 days before the hearing, she played her final card. Victoria was at work when Margaret buzzed her. "Mrs. Rodriguez, there's a reporter here from the New York Times. He says he's writing a story about your adoption of Emma." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Send him in." The reporter, David Chen, was young and ambitious. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm investigating what some are calling a purchased adoption. The story of a billionaire CEO who married a dying construction worker to acquire his daughter. That's not what happened. But you did marry Miguel Rodriguez after knowing him for only 3 days." "Yes. And he died less than a week later, leaving you with full custody of his daughter." "Yes, but—" "And you'd never had children before, never been married, had no previous experience with motherhood?" Victoria realized she was being set up. Every answer, taken out of context, would make her look calculating and cold. "Mr. Chen, I understand you have a story to write. But before you do, I'd like you to meet someone." Victoria pressed her intercom. "Margaret, could you bring Emma up from the children's area?" 5 minutes later, Emma appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over her shoulder, face lighting up when she saw Victoria. "Mommy, Victoria, I finished all my homework." Emma ran to Victoria's chair and climbed into her lap with the unconscious ease of a child who felt completely secure in her mother's love. "Emma, this is Mr. Chen, he's a writer." Emma smiled shyly. "Like the people who write my books?" "Something like that," David Chen said, and Victoria could see him studying the obvious affection between them. "Emma, could you tell Mr. Chen about our family?" "Well," Emma said seriously, "my first daddy died. But before he went to heaven, he married Mommy Victoria so she could take care of me. And she does take care of me really good. She makes pancakes and braids my hair and reads me stories and hugs me when I'm sad." Emma paused, thinking. "And I take care of her too because she was sad before, but now she's happy. Daddy said we needed each other." David Chen watched this exchange with growing discomfort. Whatever story he'd come to write, it clearly wasn't matching the reality in front of him. "Emma," he said gently, "are you happy living with Mommy Victoria?" "Super happy. We're a real family now, just like Daddy wanted." After Emma left to wait in Margaret's office, David Chen closed his notebook. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I came here expecting to write a story about exploitation, but what I see is a mother and daughter who clearly love each other. Will you still write the story?" "I'll write a story, but not the one your mother-in-law was hoping for." The next morning, the New York Times ran a front-page story titled, "When Love Transcends Law, An Unconventional Family's Fight for Survival." It painted Victoria as a woman who'd found unexpected purpose in motherhood, and Emma as a child, thriving in an environment of love and security. The article also detailed Elena Rodriguez's history of harassment and her violation of the restraining order by approaching Emma at school. But the most powerful part was the sidebar interview with Emma herself, whose 6-year-old wisdom cut through all the legal complexity. Families aren't about being the same. They're about loving each other. And me and Mommy Victoria love each other the most. The morning of the custody hearing, Victoria dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit. She'd been in countless courtrooms for business matters, but this felt different. This wasn't about money or contracts. This was about her daughter. As she walked into the courthouse with Emma's small hand in hers, Victoria thought about Miguel's final words. Thank you for saying yes to love. Today, she would find out if love was enough. The courtroom was smaller than Victoria had expected, but the weight of what would be decided there made it feel immense. Elena Rodriguez sat at the plaintiff's table with her legal team, 3 expensive lawyers in matching suits. She was a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed with the kind of rigid posture that spoke of someone accustomed to getting her way. When Elena's eyes met Victoria's across the courtroom, Victoria saw no warmth, no grandmother's love for a lost granddaughter. She saw only cold determination to win at any cost. Judge Sarah Henderson was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, but a reputation for fairness over sentiment. She'd heard thousands of custody cases, and Victoria knew she wouldn't be swayed by emotion alone. Your Honor, Elena's lead attorney, Marcus Whitmore, began his opening statement. This case is fundamentally about a child's right to be with her blood family. Elena Rodriguez is Emma's grandmother, her only living relative. She was denied the opportunity to care for her granddaughter due to a hasty marriage arrangement that exploited a dying man's desperation. Victoria watched Elena Rodriguez's face as her lawyer spoke. There was satisfaction there, a sense of righteous victory. It made Victoria's stomach turn. Miguel Rodriguez was not thinking clearly in his final days, Whitmore continued. Faced with terminal illness, he made an impulsive decision to marry a stranger rather than allowing his mother to care for his daughter. This court should not allow such a decision to stand when a loving grandmother is available to provide proper care. When it was James Morrison's turn, he stood slowly, his voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. Your Honor, this case is indeed about a child's welfare, but it's also about honoring the carefully considered decision of a loving father who knew exactly what he was doing when he chose Victoria Rodriguez to be his daughter's mother. James laid out their case methodically. Miguel's sound state of mind, the witnesses who could attest to his careful consideration, the restraining order against Elena Rodriguez, and most importantly, Emma's obvious happiness and security with Victoria. The plaintiff wants this court to believe that blood relation automatically equals superior parenting, James continued. But Miguel Rodriguez knew his mother. He knew her history of manipulation and false accusations. He made a conscious choice to protect his daughter from that environment. The first witness was Dr. Sarah Chen, who testified about Miguel's mental state during his final days. Miguel Rodriguez was completely lucid throughout his treatment, she testified. He spoke extensively about his daughter and his concerns for her future. His decision to marry Victoria Rodriguez was not made in delirium or desperation. It was the carefully planned action of a father who wanted to ensure his child's welfare. Elena Rodriguez's team countered with a psychiatrist who had never met Miguel, but testified that terminal patients often make irrational decisions based on fear and medication. Then Frank Castellano took the stand, his work clothes replaced by an ill-fitting suit, his weathered hands nervous as he spoke. Miguel was the best man I ever worked with, Frank testified, and he was terrified of his mother getting custody of Emma. He told me flat out that Elena Rodriguez had tried to take Emma away before, that she'd made his life hell after his wife died. Objection, Marcus Whitmore said. Hearsay. Your Honor, this testimony goes to the deceased father's state of mind and his reasoning for his decisions, James responded. I'll allow it. Frank continued. Miguel said his mother didn't want Emma, she wanted to win. He said Elena Rodriguez saw Emma as a possession, not a person. When Elena Rodriguez herself took the stand, Victoria watched carefully. This was the woman who was trying to take Emma away. Mrs. Rodriguez, Marcus Whitmore asked, why do you believe Emma should be in your care rather than with the defendant? Elena's voice was steady but cold. Emma is my blood granddaughter. I am her only remaining family. It's unnatural for a child to be raised by strangers when family is available. Did you have a relationship with Emma before your son's death? My son prevented me from seeing Emma. We had disagreements about child rearing and Miguel overreacted by cutting off contact. What kind of disagreements? Elena's mask slipped slightly. Miguel was too permissive. A child needs structure, discipline, proper guidance. He was raising Emma to be wild, undisciplined. Victoria felt anger building in her chest. Miguel had raised Emma to be loving, confident, and joyful, everything Elena Rodriguez clearly disapproved of. When James cross-examined Elena, he was relentless but respectful. Mrs. Rodriguez, are you aware that there was a restraining order preventing you from unsupervised contact with Emma? That was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that required police intervention on 3 separate occasions. Elena's composure cracked. My son was influenced by his wife's family. They turned him against me. Mrs. Rodriguez, 2 weeks ago you approached Emma at her school without authorization. Were you aware this violated the existing restraining order? I wanted to see my granddaughter. And in doing so, you terrified a 6-year-old child who had been explicitly protected from such contact by her father's legal action. Elena's face flushed red. That child has been brainwashed against her own family. Your Honor, James said quietly, I think Mrs. Rodriguez has revealed exactly why Miguel Rodriguez went to such lengths to protect his daughter. The final witness was Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma. Emma Rodriguez is one of the most well-adjusted children I've worked with, Dr. Martinez testified. Despite losing her father, she shows remarkable emotional stability. She speaks of Victoria Rodriguez with genuine love and trust. The bond between them is authentic and healthy. In your professional opinion, would removing Emma from Victoria Rodriguez's care be harmful? Extremely harmful. Emma has experienced enough loss. Removing her from the only stable family relationship she has would be traumatic and potentially damaging to her long-term psychological development. As the hearing concluded, Judge Henderson announced she would deliberate overnight and render her decision the following morning. That evening, Victoria sat with Emma in their apartment, trying to maintain normalcy while her heart hammered with anxiety. Mommy, Victoria, are you worried about tomorrow? Emma asked, as Victoria helped her into her pajamas. A little bit, sweetheart. I'm not worried, Emma said with 6-year-old confidence. I know you won't let anyone take me away. Victoria pulled Emma close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Never, baby girl. Never. But as Emma slept peacefully beside her that night, Victoria stared at the ceiling and prayed that tomorrow would bring the right decision. Because if it didn't, she was prepared to take Emma and disappear rather than let Elena Rodriguez destroy the family that Miguel had died to create. The morning would bring either vindication or the fight of her life. Victoria barely slept. At dawn, she stood at her bedroom window, watching the city wake up, Emma still curled peacefully in the bed behind her. In a few hours, they would know whether their family would survive. Emma woke to find Victoria already dressed in her most conservative suit, armor for the battle ahead. Today's the big day, isn't it, Mommy Victoria? Victoria sat on the bed beside her daughter. Yes, sweetheart. Today the judge decides that you get to stay with me forever. What if she doesn't? Victoria took Emma's small hands in hers. Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. No matter what happens in that courtroom today, you are my daughter. I am your mother. Nothing will ever change that. Promise? I promise. And remember what Daddy always told you about promises? Emma's face grew solemn. A promise is forever. Even after someone goes to heaven. That's right. And I'm promising you forever. The courthouse was packed with reporters. Word had spread about the custody battle between the billionaire CEO and the grandmother, and the story had captured public attention. Victoria held Emma's hand tightly as they walked through the crowd of cameras and shouting questions. Inside the courtroom, Elena Rodriguez sat with her legal team, her face set in grim determination. She'd read the newspaper coverage and knew public opinion was turning against her, but she clearly wasn't giving up. Judge Henderson entered precisely at 9 a.m., her expression unreadable. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence in this matter, she began. This case centers on the best interests of 6-year-old Emma Rodriguez. and that principle will guide my decision." Victoria's heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The law traditionally favors placement with blood relatives when possible. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez is indeed Emma's grandmother and has legal standing to seek custody. Victoria felt the world tilting. "However," Judge Henderson continued, "the law also requires me to consider the totality of circumstances, including the expressed wishes of Emma's father, the history of family relationships, and most importantly, what arrangement serves Emma's best interests." The judge looked directly at Elena Rodriguez. "Mrs. Rodriguez, your history of harassment toward your son and granddaughter is deeply troubling. The restraining order was not a misunderstanding. It was a court's recognition that your behavior was harmful to this child." Elena Rodriguez's face flushed red, but she remained silent. "Furthermore, your recent violation of that order by approaching Emma at school demonstrates a continued pattern of putting your desires above Emma's welfare." Judge Henderson turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Victoria Rodriguez, your marriage to Miguel Rodriguez was indeed unusual in its timing and circumstances. However, the evidence clearly shows that Miguel Rodriguez was of sound mind and made a deliberate choice about his daughter's future." Victoria held her breath. Dr. Chen's testimony establishes that Miguel Rodriguez was fully capable of making rational decisions. Mr. Castellano's testimony reveals that this decision was not impulsive, but based on Miguel Rodriguez's deep knowledge of his mother's character and his determination to protect his daughter. The judge paused, her gaze settling on Emma, who sat quietly beside Victoria. Most importantly, Dr. Martinez's evaluation confirms that Emma Rodriguez is thriving in Victoria Rodriguez's care. The bond between them is genuine, healthy, and in Emma's best interest to maintain. Victoria felt tears starting but held them back. "Therefore, it is the decision of this court that Emma Rodriguez shall remain in the custody of Victoria Rodriguez. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez's petition is denied." The courtroom erupted. Elena Rodriguez shot to her feet, her composure finally breaking completely. "This is wrong," she shouted. "She's my granddaughter. My blood." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Judge Henderson said sternly, "you will respect this court's decision. Furthermore, the existing restraining order remains in effect. You are not to approach Emma or attempt to contact her without prior court approval." Elena Rodriguez's lawyers tried to calm her, but she shook them off. "This isn't over," she hissed as she stormed out of the courtroom. Victoria knelt beside Emma, who had watched the proceedings with wide eyes. "What does that mean, Mommy Victoria?" "It means you get to stay with me forever, sweetheart. Just like Daddy wanted." Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. "I knew you wouldn't let anyone take me away." Outside the courthouse, reporters surged forward, but Victoria had eyes only for Emma. They'd won. Their family had survived. That evening, as they sat together on their colorful carpet, Emma working on a drawing while Victoria read through the legal documents that officially confirmed their victory. Emma looked up suddenly. "Mommy Victoria?" "Yes, baby?" "I think Daddy's happy today." Victoria smiled, feeling a peace she'd never known before. "I think you're right, sweetheart." Emma went back to her drawing, then held it up proudly. It showed 3 stick figures under a bright yellow sun, a tall woman with long hair, a small girl with dark curls, and a man with angel wings floating above them. "That's our family," Emma explained. "You, me, and Daddy watching over us from heaven." Victoria felt tears of joy flowing freely now. "It's perfect, Emma. We're perfect." As Emma fell asleep in Victoria's arms that night, Victoria thought about the incredible journey that had brought them together. A year ago, she'd been a successful but empty woman who measured her worth in quarterly profits and market shares. Now she was a mother, a widow, a fighter who had learned that the most important victories couldn't be found in boardrooms or bank accounts. The most important victory was love. Messy, complicated, transformative love that had the power to create families where none had existed before. "Thank you, Miguel," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for choosing us." Outside their windows, the city hummed with 8 million separate lives. But inside their home, Victoria Rodriguez held her daughter close and knew that she had everything she'd never known she wanted. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring, "Love you, Mommy." Love you too, baby girl, Victoria whispered back. Forever and ever, just like Daddy promised. And in that moment, their unconventional family was complete, bound not by blood or law but by the unbreakable power of chosen love.